Welcome to our Photoshop workshop day one. Today we're going to go over the basics of Photoshop and learn some of the essential tools that you will use every time you jump in to do graphic design, poster design, or typographic design like we will work on today. We're going to build a typographic poster together today, something you'll be able to follow along with and emulate as you make your own posters for this class. So let's go ahead and jump in. One of the first things we will do to kick off this workshop is to download the workshop files that you need to work on today. And you're only going to need two for right now. The first is called foldedpaperstrip.jpg, and the next one is called shreddedpaper.jpg. And you'll notice at the end, one says JPEG, one says JPG. They're both JPEGs. They open the same. Photoshop uses them interchangeably, and so does the internet. So these are a shareable file online. It's something I went around and found. And what I want to show you is what we're going to work on today. This is the poster we will create together about the benefits of a notification detox. I'm going to change the font slightly and show you how to add a different kind of typeface in there. But this is what we'll create together. And this is drawn from inspiration from two different posters. This is the first one. And what I really like about this poster, which is drawn from Poulin's language of graphic design, is the use of texture that you can imagine grabbing this piece of paper and holding it, and also its use of light and asymmetry as well. You can tell that the main headline here on this yellow strip of paper is balanced out really well with the smaller typeface down in the bottom right-hand corner. This is going to be our main source of inspiration. And for your posters, you can draw poster inspiration from the Language of Graphic Design book that we worked through in class, or you may also go into Canvas and find our poster inspirations folder that has many posters that you can draw inspiration from there as well. And so your two inspiration posters can be from either of these sources. And really you're finding a way to marry these and to bring them together. And one can play a really dominant role. As you can tell, there's a really similar sort of layout and use of paper drawn from this one. But what I also like is this poster here and its use of texture and light as well. And I wanted to really think about its use of paper and shadow here that I wanted to emulate. And I pulled that into the background here with these shredded strips of paper that we will use. So go ahead and download those two files and save them to a folder. What I tend to like to do is to create a folder for this class, and I have a folder called Workshops, and I created a Photoshop folder there, and I would suggest downloading your files there so you can go and open them at that time. And let's see, okay. What I want you to do next is to go ahead and create the canvas for this. And this is really going to be what happens every time you open Photoshop brand new, that you will be able to create a new document. And you can either launch it and click on new, or you can go up to File and New. The shortcut for this is also Command N or Control N if you're on a Windows machine. And this gives us the ability to create a new layout, and you have some different options for photo, print, art and illustration, or recent. We're going to start from scratch here, and you could either choose recent or any of them really, as long as you have the options to change things over here. And what we will call this is Workshop Day 1 poster. And we are working in inches. You can also work in pixels or centimeters. For this project, we are working in inches. And we are going to set this as a 16-inch wide by 22-inch tall poster. Our resolution is going to be 300 pixels per inch, which is that very high resolution poster that we're going to create. And you'll notice here in color mode, there are some options: RGB, red, green, blue, which is meant for screens. So anytime you're designing something in Photoshop that's meant to be looked at on a screen, RGB is the way to go. CMYK is the 4-color print process for printing things out. And we would use this normally to print. Most of the printers these days it's going to not be a true 4-color print process on the printers you might use in your everyday life. So we're going to stick to RGB here to get that vibrancy that we are looking for. CMYK stands for cyan, magenta, yellow, and key basically means black. And on with a good printer on a good piece of paper, the white comes through to add a lot of vibrancy to a CMYK print. And so what's on the screen might look a lot duller than it will actually print out because of the paper use in that. But for this project, we're going to stick with RGB. The background contents often will default to white. We're going to use transparent here just so you can get a sense of how we are working with just a blank canvas, no color. It's just an empty starting point. And we will click create. And that gives us this layout here. And you can see all of these checkerboard pattern, which means there's nothing there. It's a transparent, empty canvas at this point. And what I want us to do now is go ahead and open that folded paper strip image. To begin with, what I want to do is talk a little bit about work layouts here. So your Photoshop might look a little bit different than my Photoshop. If you want to go up to Window and Workspace, you can really change these around. And we can work here in Graphic and Web. That's a really fantastic layout here. And so if you go to Window, Workspace, you can also work just for photography, and it gives you all the tools that are going to be best for photography. And you can have also just the essentials, which some of you will probably start with because that's the default and it looks like this. What I'm going to do is go Workspace, Graphic and Web. And it looks like this. Now, throughout the process of working with Photoshop, our tools are over here on the left. And we'll walk through many of these to give you a sense of how to use these tools. If you're ever missing a tool, what you would do is go Edit, and then down to Toolbar. And you can see this is what's on the toolbar. And here are some extra tools that you can pull over. Dodge and burn if you're working with photograph, for example, or if you need to smudge or blur something. Paint bucket tool, for example. And what you would do essentially, sometimes the gradient tool and the paint bucket tool might go hand in hand. You just drag them over, and that now exists under there. And one of the early tools we'll use is a polygonal lasso tool, and just making sure that that is there. And I'm going to click done. Now, for example, where did the paint bucket tool go on? Let me zoom in here onto my toolbar. If you notice a little triangle in the bottom right corner of any of these tools, that means there is another tool hiding behind it. And what you do is basically just press and click on it. And then that next tool comes up and you can choose that instead of the other one. So you can see the different kinds of tools that are available to you there. And you can also collapse the toolbar right there. And one of the things I want to stress is as you're working in Photoshop, don't be afraid to play around, move things. You will not break anything as you're working through it. So experimentation is really key here, and just understanding that as long as you're kind of saving as you go, you can't do anything wrong as you're playing around with Photoshop. And if you have any questions or you get stuck on anything, feel free to reach out, meet up with me in office hours to walk through this. Okay, so now let's go ahead and find the picture that we need. So we are going to go File, Open, to go and get those pictures. And I think I actually saved them in the wrong spot. I did. So hopefully they are saved in your workshop folder. Here is the folded paper strip that we are going to use. This is a photograph of a luggage tag, I believe. And I liked the shadow. I liked the texture of it, the materiality of it. It's just going to be a good piece to emulate that, the essence of what I liked about the original poster here. In Photoshop, what you're going to do often is pull images that exist around the internet into your posters, and you can do that freely here. Resolution does play a big role in this, and we will see kind of what the resolution is as we look at it. You can always check out image size as well by going image size, and it will tell you the pixels. And this is a fairly high resolution thing, but you'll notice here it's 72 pixels per inch. So the width and height of the pixels is a little deceiving here because the resolution is a little bit lower than what we created. And as we've got this image here, we want to isolate it. I don't want to pull over this blue background. I want just the strip of paper in my poster. I'm going to go ahead and close these. And what I want to do is pull this over without that blue background, which means we need to isolate it in some way. So there are several ways to do this in Photoshop, and they all exist under the Select option at the very top of the page. So, and on a Mac, it's up here, and for a Windows machine, you will see this menu option at the very top. And you'll see that embedded actually in the Photoshop top frame there. And what we are looking for is Select, and there are a couple of options here. There is an option for Photoshop to identify the subject. What is the main thing in this picture? Can you please select it for us? So we'll click that and see how it does. And it does a really fantastic job here. And the reason it does a fantastic job is because the subject of the image is very distinct from its background. So Photoshop knows exactly what I'm looking for. What is the main subject of this? And it has selected it for us. And you'll see what are often called the marching ants, this little dotted line that's moving around the item. So we know that it's selected. And we can cut it out. Before we do, I want to show you a couple of other ways for us to do this. So let's deselect those marching ants, and that's done with a shortcut, either Command D if you're on a Mac or Control D on a PC, and then those disappear. So let's do a different kind of selection. Let's go select color range. And here we can do select sampled colors because I do want this little eyedropper. And I'm going to click it somewhere on the background here, and it's going to pick just the blue. And your selection preview can be quick mask. It could be a white matte, black matte, grayscale, or none. And with none, it just shows you in the little preview image there. I'm going to go back to quick mask. So what is in red is actually what's not selected here because I picked the blue. I want Photoshop to pick every color of blue. And you'll notice this fuzziness thing. If I drag it way down, the selection, there's less of the blue selected. And the more I bump up the fuzziness, the more of the blue is selected, even into the paper. So if I were to go all the way up to 200 with fuzziness, any sort of shade of blue that's in that strip of paper is going to be selected. And I don't want that. I want to maintain the integrity of that folded strip of paper. So I'm going to pull this back a bit, and I can really see here when that is basically all black inside my little selection, that is what I want. And it's around 100, 103, somewhere around there. And it's a very inexact science here. It's more experimental than anything. And when you've got it to where the image in here, and again, it might look like this, but if you click on selection, you do have that black and white option there. And I'm going to click OK. Now, if I were to take this out, it would be, if I were to cut this piece out to paste it into my poster, that would be incorrect because actually it's the blue that's selected. I selected the color range of blue. And the reason I did that is because the dominant color here is blue. It's the easiest thing to click on. It has the least variation of color, while the white, there's many grays here. If I were to click on the white, I would have to contend with a lot of the different grays. And really just pick the most basic dominant color in your image if there is one to get rid of it. And so I don't have the strip of paper selected, I have the background selected. And if I want to go ahead and pull that image over, what I would do is go select inverse. And now the strip of paper is selected. Okay, and what you do at this point is once you get that thing selected that you want, we will go up to image and we will cut it, which is shortcut Command or Control X or edit cut. And it's out of there. And the reason this is red here is because my background color is red. Yours probably won't be. It might be black or something along those lines. I have the background color set as red. I'm going to go back to my workshop poster day 1. And I'm going to go up to edit paste or Command or Control V. And there it is. It is ready to be used in my poster. I wanted to give you a couple of other options. You don't need to follow along here. But if you do want to follow along, all I did was Command or Control Z to go back a step. Anytime you need to go back, you just hit Command Z or Control Z or edit undo. I'm going to deselect this, again, Command D. And I want to show you a couple of other options for selecting things. You can select focus area, and it will do a similar thing to subject. It's looking for what's in focus as opposed to what's out of focus. I'm going to cancel that. The other option is are these things over in our toolbar. One of them is called the quick selection, and one is called the magic wand. Right now I'm on magic wand tool, and let me back up a little. Okay, I have zoomed in way too much here accidentally because I'm playing around with my mouse. If that ever happens to you, you need to see the whole thing that you're working on. You can simply double click on the hand and that will show you everything. If you want to see it at scale, you can double click the magnifying glass and that takes you there. The hand will always kind of put it to scale there. With the magic wand tool, you can basically click on something and it will find similar colors kind of throughout. And you can have a tolerance. So if I click on white, I want white and 10 shades of white, into the grays, for example. You could set it to 50 different variations of white. And you can either choose contiguous or non-contiguous. So if I have contiguous selected, that means they must be touching. So let me click this. And that selects that. And you'll notice that it didn't select everything. So what that meant is my tolerance is not quite there. Let me go ahead and undo that selection. Let's bump this up to 100 different shades. That's getting better. And if I go ahead and undo that as well, let's do 130 different. There we go. And that starts to capture everything. And now you'll notice, for example, I've got this black square in the middle that I do want to pull over, but it hasn't been selected. What I will do is up in the very top bar here, there's these two squares together, and that means add to my selection. I'm going to click again with the magic wand tool, and please select this thing that's there as well. So let's see if I click on that. It adds it, especially because I clicked contiguous. Let's see what happens if I deselect contiguous. Yeah, it selects the whole thing because I've asked it to identify 130 variations off of this dark gray color. And so this blue happens to be one of those colors. So it does need to be contiguous, find 130 variations of this dark gray that is also touching this square. And then that is ready to go for us. I'm going to deselect and then finally just show you a quick selection tool, which shows up as this sort of brush, and I can basically just start brushing things and it will start selecting them. And it's a very easy, quick way to get a big item like this selected and ready to go. Okay, I am done with the folded paper strip. I'm going to close it, and I don't need to save it. I'm not saving this file, any of the changes that I'm using on it. So now what we need to do is move the object now that we've pulled it into our canvas. And this is done with the move tool, which is these 4 arrows here. The shortcut for that is V on your computer. So if you just tap V, it'll take you to the move tool. And you'll notice that we are in layer 1, and that is the layer that's selected, and I can just start dragging things around. There's no other layer here. The only thing is a blank canvas and this strip of paper. And what I want to do is begin to emulate this poster and to rotate things in so that the type will kind of follow the same trajectory. So what we will do is transform this. And we do that by going up to Edit, Transform. Edit and Free Transform. Command T is the shortcut for that. And that pulls up these handles here, which are these nodes around the corners. And what I want to do, first of all, is to rotate this. And to do that, I'm going to hover over one of the corners until the cursor on my computer changes to kind of a curvy arrow. Instead of the 2 arrows, it turns into an arrow with a curve. And what I can do is click and drag until I get it into kind of a position that I like. Let's compare it with that. Oh, it disappeared. Let me do that again. So I think I like that. And what we will do is then make it larger. We're going to enlarge it, and we can grab one of those corners as well, and really any of them, and just start pulling. And you'll notice it automatically scales it for you perfectly. It does not change or distort it in any way. If you did want it to change and kind of distort and get longer, for example, you would hold the Shift key down. And now you'll notice that it starts to stretch. I'm going to let go of Shift. I don't want that to happen here. Really what we are working on is to get this set up in a way that allows us to use this as kind of a canvas for our text. And you'll notice I'm blowing up an image that was a lower resolution. And this isn't generally a good practice because when you start to blow things up, pixels are lost and it gets the quality of the image deteriorates. Photoshop has gotten really excellent over the last few years with us being able to enlarge things and through machine learning, filling in the gaps. It's still not a fantastic practice, and I would suggest finding images that already are at a high resolution for your projects, especially when doing graphic design like this. So I like where this is at. So if you can get your paper strip in a similar position, you should be good to go. And what you need to do at this point is confirm that you're done transforming it. And that can be done either through this check mark up here at the top of the screen, or just hit enter. I always tend to just like to hit enter. And we are good to go there. Okay, now we need to go ahead and save our project at this point. So what we will do is go ahead and go File, Save, and it's going to ask us, where do you want to save this? You can save it to your Creative Cloud account, and that's great. So that's one way to do it. Let's go ahead and start there. And we are ready to go. And now on any machine, if you were to sign into Photoshop or the Creative Cloud, you can then pull up this file. So if you're working on a library computer right now, you could save it to the Creative Cloud, sign in later, and be able to open it from, it's right there, open from Creative Cloud. There's Workshop Poster Day 1. And alternatively, we can go ahead and save as, which I want you to do as well. And we're going to choose on your computer. I'm going to go back to my workshops folder into my Photoshop folder. And you'll notice here an important feature, and I really want to stress this, the format. It's asking you, what kind of format do you want to save this as? And we are saving this as a PSD file, which is a Photoshop native file. That means it's editable, you can change it, it's got all of its layers, all the text, everything in it that you can change. Let's say you decide you don't like the typeface, you can change that. Let's say you don't like the background or you need to adjust the color. All of those layers and things are ready to go and editable at that point. And we do want to save it like this. And let me go ahead and save it like that. Let's go back up to save as. Again, I want to show you the various options here. Not too many. You can save it as a PDF. You can save it as a PNG file, a TIFF file. Alternatively, if we go up to save as a copy, we now have different options. And this one is JPEG, for example. PSD files you cannot post onto the web. You can't share them with people in the same way you can share a JPEG or a PNG file. So Photoshop files are meant for you, but they're editable. They're kind of like your Microsoft Word document that you can go back in and make changes to. And a JPEG is kind of like you've already printed it out and handed it to somebody. You can't go in and edit the text after the fact. But with the Photoshop file, the native Photoshop file, you can go ahead and do those things. Okay, our next step is I would like to perhaps show you how to add a more significant drop shadow here. If I zoom in, this does have a drop shadow to it, and it's good. If I wanted to emphasize just the drop shadow, for example, or the shading around the object, there are different ways that we can do this. With this layer, if you go down to the little FX button at the very bottom of the page, you can then click drop shadow. And we'll think about where the light is coming from for this, which is about a 35-degree angle, let's say. The opacity we can lighten a little bit if we want to, maybe to 20%. And with drop shadows, you can play with things like the distance, how far away the shadow is, the spread of it. You can kind of see what that does. And also the size of the shadow. Okay, and these are parameters. Again, you're just sort of playing it by ear, whatever you think looks good. There is no hard and fast rule. You can follow what I have on my screen or adjust it to what you think looks good, and then we'll click OK. And we've basically now added an effect here, and you can turn off that effect by clicking the little eye in the layer. And I can turn off this entire layer by just clicking off that on or off that eye. We are ready to add some text to our poster here. And I'm going to download a custom text for this to show you how to do that. If you would like to install a text that you like And one of the places that we will do this is dafont.com. And for this project, we are going to use a sans serif font. And right in the middle of the page under basic on dafont.com, I can click on sans serif. And what I mean by sans serif is this. So a sans serif does not have these kind of objects attached to the type itself, which are called like feet or other kinds of decoration to it. You can see the F, for example, here is just very straight, simple, clean in a sans serif typeface. Serif fonts like Times New Roman have these elements to them that are called serifs. The serif being the little foot that's hanging off of the typeface. So on dafont.com, what we are going to do is download a typeface. I'm just going to pick this first one called Lemon Milk as an example, and I'll click download. I will go to my workshops folder, and I'm going to download it there, and it saves as a zip. And if I open this folder up, you can see I have a bunch of OTF files, which are these typeface files that they have given me. Now, if you are on a Windows machine, you can simply double click, or I think you can even right click and install them directly from this folder. On a Mac, it's more complicated. In my Finder, I'm going to go ahead and go Command N for a new window. And I'm going to go to my hard drive. If you can't see your hard drive in this folder over here, you can adjust that in your view options or in your preferences. Let me see if it's preferences. Forgive me. Sidebar, yes. So if you go to Finder and Preferences, you can click on hard disks, and that's essentially what we want. So I have my Macintosh HD. I can double click on Library, and then I can double click on Fonts. And here is the mess of these fonts here. I am then going to grab all of these OTF files. I clicked on the first one and I shift clicked on the last one, and I'm just going to drag them over, and I do want to move all of those over to my fonts folder. Now I've got Lemon Milk ready to go as a typeface that I can use. Now in Photoshop, some of these typefaces might not show up right away. You might need to close Photoshop and reopen it sometimes. Let's see how we do here. I'm going to click on the text tool over here, shortcut T. And I'm just going to make sure it's just the horizontal type tool. And what I want to write here is I'm going to start off with the words benefits of A. And I'm going to do this in all caps. Typeface. And one of the things here too I want to stress is when it comes to creating a space for your type, you simply just click once. A lorem ipsum text will pop up. And the only time let me go ahead and undo that by getting rid of that. The only time you want to drag out a text box like this is if you're going to do a paragraph full of text, and we can play around with that later. But for now, what we're going to do is go ahead and simply take the text tool. I want to tap once, and with my cap lock on, I'm going to write benefits of A, and it went off the screen. I can't see it. But I can adjust that over in the character tab here. Now I want, mine was really big. Yours could be totally tiny. But if I click on character, and if you don't see that, you can always just go window character to turn it on. And I can change this to something like a 30 30-point typeface or something along those lines. And now I'm going to click on whatever the typeface is that it came up with for you. For me, it's still on Times New Roman. And I'm going to find lemon milk. And I like the regular, lemon milk regular. And I'm going to keep it black. And I do want this to be a little bit larger. Let me show you one technique to make it larger. Again, you can simply just type it in, or if you hover over the T that's next to it, your cursor turns into a hand with two arrows on each side of it. And if you click and drag to the right, it starts to get larger. And once I'm happy with that, I can begin moving it around with my move tool. And now I want to transform this in the same way that I transformed the paper with that free transform option. Command T or Control T. And then I want to go ahead and rotate this. I want to line it up with the edge of that text, so I know it's basically straight. Okay, and that looks about right. And once you're happy with it, you can hit enter. And now we're going to add the two words notification detox. Again, I just tapped my text tool. And here I'm going to write the word notification, and then I'm going to hit enter and write the word detox. Okay, now your typeface probably looks like that in terms of its distance, and I think that makes sense. I want to change the color of this to orange. And so if I click on color, it brings up this option for me, and I can essentially pull up this sidebar until I start to get into an orange, and then I can move this around until I find maybe kind of a reddish orange that I like. That looks great. And if you have trouble with that, you can always add the hex code for whatever colors you're working with. If you need to share colors with people, we are using this particular color. It will typically have a hex code with it, which is the # followed by a string of alphanumeric digits. And this one, for example, this particular orange is FF7E00. And you can just type that in there if you like. And then we'll click OK. And again, we're going to transform this. I'm going to rotate it, make sure that that these line up together. I'm just eyeballing this. It doesn't have to be perfect. And have these kind of live along the edge here. And now I want to enlarge this, and I can do that either through the character panel over on the right, change the actual size of it, or I can just click and drag. And I'm going to make this fairly large and kind of pull this all down. And I'll probably pull the benefits of a notification detox down as well. And I'll hit enter. Now, one of the things that you really need to know about how Photoshop works is the layers palette. So you'll see layers over here on the right. This is a hierarchy. So layers that are on top here are in front. Those are the things that live in front of an object. So if I were to take notification detox and drag it down, which you can do, below layer 1, essentially layer 1 is now in front of notification detox. So anything that's above or below is how the hierarchy of layers works. And so if you add something to your Photoshop project and it doesn't seem to have appeared, check in the layers to see where it's at. Where does this live in terms of the hierarchy of layers? And you may need to kind of move it and drag it around. You can simply just click on these things and drag them around until you see those blue lines pop up. If you ever need to turn off a layer, again, you can just disable it temporarily by clicking the little eyeball. You can also lock things. Now that I've got 3 layers here, some of you, if you clicked on benefits of a type layer, it will select it automatically. Right now, if I click on it, the only thing that's moving is notification detox. That's because that's the layer I am selected on. You might have this button selected that says auto select. And if I click on benefits of it, now I can move that around. Almost always I have this disabled. I prefer to click directly on the layers when I need to move things around. And that to me is just a better workflow for this. I'm going to shrink this back just a hair and move it up. And this is sort of the process that I engage in all the time, which is to kind of move things around until they kind of look like I want them to. And you can nudge things around if you're selected on a layer and you're also selected on the move tool. You can use your arrow keys to move things around until they kind of look the way that you want them to. Okay, and now to zoom out, you can, if you have a trackpad, you can kind of simply pinch and zoom. The other option is to hold the space bar down and the command or control and then click. That's going to allow you to zoom. And then to zoom out is space bar, command or control, and then alter option. And that turns it into that. And if you click on the magnifying glass, that's the other option. I can kind of zoom one way or another. And the last option, which I already showed you, is to double click on the hand to be able to see the whole project. One last thing I want to work on with the typeface is to show you some different options for making, just really fine-tuning typography and text. And you'll see in the characters palette here that my typeface is 94 points. And then it's got this thing that says auto. And this is the distance if I've got 2 lines of text, which notification detox is, because I hit enter. These are the same layer, but I hit enter. So this is basically how far apart should those 2 pieces of this type be. If I click on 72, for example, it's going to pull it right up to it. And again, I can do what's called scrubbing it, which is if I hover over those 2 A's, my cursor changes and I can click and drag to the right and have them a little bit closer together, which I do tend to like. And then that allows me to kind of decide exactly how large I want this text to be. And again, I can increase the size of it. And yeah, kind of play around with it and see what I like. The other thing I can do here is adjust what's called its kerning. And kerning is the distance between letters here. And that's what this VA is. So if I want them to be closer together, I can choose something like -50, and you can see it squishes them all together a little bit closer. So if I wanted the typeface to be even larger, I could bring these letters closer together. And I do like some of that, so I'm just kind of playing around with it. And what I do want to do is have the N just over the edge of this because I'm going to cut it off ultimately. And same thing with the A. I will have it, the edge of it cut off potentially, depending on if I like it after I play around with it a bit. And I'm going to bump that up just a little bit. Okay, so I've got that at about 85 points. My notification detox is about 100, 101 points, and I've got them laid out this way. Now, one thing that we can do here is to alter these and kind of cut it off at this point. And I'm going to show you one destructive way that we can do that. So what I want to do is go ahead and save at this point. So Command or Control S is your shortcut, or File, Save. Now, if I want to cut off this piece of the N to make it look like the N is going underneath the piece of paper, I can't really easily do that because the typeface is what's called a vector. It's not made of pixels, it's actually made of shapes. And in order to manipulate it in a way that I want to, I have to turn it into a pixelated object, which means I need to rasterize it. So rasterization is taking something like a vector-like typography here and turning it into pixels, which means it's no longer editable. So make sure that you have saved it, and also you are sure that you have spelled things correctly. What I'm going to do is right click over on the edge of this layer, you can hit Control and then click, and we're going to choose the option that says rasterize type. I'm going to do the same thing with benefits. And now these are no longer editable. They are pixels. They are no longer typable words in Photoshop. So usually when I'm going to do this sort of thing, I save it as a different version of this file. And for this project, since we're just moving through a workshop quickly, I won't spend too much time with that. Next, I want to go to my lasso tool. And this is a shortcut L, but yours might be the circle L, or the circle lasso. What we want is polygonal lasso. So I click and hold until I have that. I make sure this first box is selected. Feather is at 0. Feathering is if you want a soft edge to what you're cutting out of an image. If you want it to have kind of that fading in kind of effect. We don't want that. We want a hard edge here. And what we're going to do is I'm going to basically encircle this part of the N. I'm going to start down here. I'm going to click once. I'm going to go follow the edge of the paper just to the other side of this. And then I'm just going to click, click, click all the way back until my cursor looks like this. It's the polygonal lasso icon with a circle. And that means you have returned back to the beginning. And I want to cut this N. If I were to do that right now, it wouldn't work because let me see if it brings up the error message. It should. Yes, could not complete because the area is empty. And the reason is I'm currently selected on the benefits layer, not the notification layer. So there are no pixels to be cut right now. I need to click on notification detox. And now what I can do is go edit and cut. And I have removed that piece of the N. Now I'm going to do the same thing with the A within this layer. So I've got polygonal lasso chosen. I'm going to select just below it, and now just above it, and now I'll just kind of circle out and back to the start. I'm circling the thing I want to cut, and then I can go up to edit, cut. Okay. And now if I back up, you can kind of see what that looks like. And one last thing that we can do here to really build the connection between this type and the paper beneath it is to do what's called a blend mode. So on notification detox, you'll notice above in the layer, it says normal. This is where your blend modes are. And what it will blend with is the layer immediately beneath it, which for me is the paper. So if I click this and I start to change, kind of move through these, you can see what happens here. The first set of them makes it darker. The following set makes it lighter. And then you can kind of just see, and it varies widely from layer to layer, just depends on how these two layers interact with each other. And I think I kind of like the linear burn option. Usually it's the multiply that tends to be the option that we will use here. But I do like how dark the end, the very last end in notification detox is with a linear burn. So that's what we will choose. And you can see also if I zoom in that the fold of the paper also comes through because of that blend mode. Okay, I like where we're at. We can go ahead and save if we want. And again, probably what I will do is maybe save it as a different version. Call this rasterized PSD. So I can go back if I don't like this typeface, or my client, if I'm working with a client, they say this typeface is really bad. Let's change it. Now we can go back and fix it because we have the two different versions. Let's go ahead and add the final bits of text, again, drawing inspiration from how they have done the text right here. We will tap here and write, and I don't need cap locks anymore, although it looks like this typeface only has cap locks. Take a 7-day detox. And we will shrink this way down to about 45 points. I'm going to change the line height to 48 points. And we should be ready to go. And let me see what happens if we choose the bold. Let's try that. Okay, now we are going to write spring 2023. And I'm going to put that back to regular. And this can be a similar size. And I'm just moving it around with my keyboard up and down key, left and right. And now we will write turn off all unnecessary notifications on your phone. And that all needs to be, I need to correct the spelling on all of that and make it much smaller. Okay, and I'm going to probably pull this back to about 20 point typeface. And I'm making it regular. And then the last thing is I'm going to talk about the benefits of doing a notification detox, which is increased focus. I'll hit enter. Increased productivity, lower anxiety, eliminate reliance on your phone. These are all from the article that we read about notification detoxes. Okay, so now I've got these 3 items here, actually 4, including 7-day detox. I want to align them and make sure that they are all perfectly lined up. There's a couple of ways to do that. If you go up to your view and then turn on rulers, rulers are a really fantastic way to line things up and using rulers. And you can see I have my rulers enabled on top and bottom. If I actually click right on the ruler and drag, I can set up a ruler there that everything can snap to. And if I were to grab, take a 7-day detox, it will line it up for me right there. So that's one way to do this. The other way is, for example, let me grab, turn off all unnecessary notifications. If I hold Control or Command and click through all of these until all of them are highlighted in my layers palette, what I can do is use these controls at the top of the page to align them. The other way is through Layer, Align, and what I'm aligning here are the left edges. And that pulls them all exactly where I need them to be. And you can do the same, that you can distribute things, make sure they are evenly distributed. It's a little bit tricky here because we have text with multiple lines versus text with a single line. It won't quite work out as I would hope it would. Okay, so that looks good to me. Last thing we will do together is to bring in a background that pulls in some of this concept of shredded paper and the tactility and light of that shredded paper. So go to File, and we're going to find that shredded paper JPEG. Okay, and we will go ahead and pull this in. There are a couple of different ways that we can do this. We can go Edit, and we can, oh, sorry. Sorry, it's Select. If you go Select All, we will see those marching ants around the entire thing, and then we can copy or cut it and go back here. And now, just to emphasize what we will do is if we go up to Edit Paste, and we are selected on the very top layer, then that image comes in on top of everything. And that's okay. We will simply just drag it down to the very bottom. And the last thing we want to do is to transform it. So Command T, and we will rotate it. And if you hold Shift while you rotate, it will do it according to kind of perfect degrees. And now I want to make it larger, and that looks good. And once it's large enough and covering the whole thing, then I can hit Enter. Now, a lot of this type gets lost in the background. The background is pretty busy. And so there are some ways that we can play with this. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this ruler by going up to guides, and then clear the guides. So this gets lost. What I really want to do is find an area of this image that kind of works really well to highlight this text down here. And so I'm going to go back to my transform option. And what I would like to do is to, let's see, if I flip this all the way around, that's still pretty busy, but I see this section right here of this image is blank. And so what I would love to do is flip this around so that it's mirrored on itself. So I'm going to hit Enter. I've flipped this, 180 degrees just to play around with it. And now there are a couple of options here. And what I want to do is to go ahead and go up to Edit Transform, and I want to flip it horizontally. And there, that image now lives with the lighter bottom right corner helping to highlight this text down here. Okay, and I will go ahead and save. And I like where this is at. We've got the orange kind of matching across. If I if I wanted to change that, I actually still could, even though it's been rasterized. I can go back to my effects panel and do color overlay. Oops, I'm on the wrong layer. Okay. Color overlay, and I can click on the black image here and just pick a different part of this, or pick a different area and just change the color as I see fit. So that adds a different effect. You can see those two different colors. I turned it off just so you know that you can change the colors of these objects as you see fit. Last thing I want to do is to de-emphasize the background so it's not quite so cluttered. I really do like the clutter, and I would leave it like this. I'd print it. I think it works because there is this sense of busyness that mirrors the context here of notification detoxes, and that works really well. So turning this in just like it is fantastic. But I want to show you one last thing that you can do with this bottom layer. And I'm going to click on it. I'm going to go up to Image, Adjustments. And here are a range of things. Brightness and contrast is the first one we can play with, where we can bump up the brightness of it. We can drop the contrast if we want, or bump up the contrast. And again, just playing around with it to see what works for you. Is great. I'm trying to think about matching these, and I just clicked OK, just randomly at any point, and whatever looks good for you. Another option is adjusting hue and saturation. You can change the colors by playing with the hue. Saturation will make it grayscale or super saturated, for example. And again, lightness is similar to brightness and contrast. Within hue and saturation, the other thing you can do is click the colorize button, which turns it all shades of a particular color. So if we did want it to be maybe more of that orangish color, we could do something like that. And you could turn it in like that, and that would work really well also. And that helps highlight the headline and what's back there. I really like that. Actually, I think that would be a good place to stop if we wanted to. Last thing I want to show you is if you go to Image, Adjustments, and Match Color. Our source is this particular Photoshop file that I've got open, which is rasterized. And what's the thing I want to match? The thing I want to match is actually layer 1, which is that slip of paper. And it basically just turns everything white, creates a very simple object for the backdrop here. And this is where we are going to end. So I'm going to go ahead and click Save. And to wrap up your workshop for today, what I'd like you to do is go File, Save as a Copy. And we're going to save this as a JPEG. And we will call this Workshop Day 1 Poster Final. Get rid of copy. And I want to save it. When you save as a JPEG, it's going to ask you what size you want to. And since we are printing this out, if we were, if this was your final poster for this project for this day, this is what you would ultimately do. You would make sure that it's the largest file size possible. That's what you're going to save it as today. We click OK. And under workshop files for today's workshop, you will upload this JPEG as evidence of following along with me. All right, thank you for following along. I hope you have a good day ahead, and I'll see you for workshop day 2.